All right, good evening. Welcome to the BPC Outsider Endurance webinar. Where our goal tonight is just kind of an ask the coaches type webinar. So any questions you guys have, feel free to just either blurt them out, type them in the chat, whatever's easiest for you. We've got one question just to start things off tonight, which is from somebody following the training plan that's available through Training Peaks. I think it's on the Outsider Endurance website as well, the free training plan for the Patriot half. The question is, when does the order of workouts become important? Like, when does it begin to matter that I do things as prescribed? Sue, would you like to take this first question? I guess, would you like to first tell us who you are?
I am Sue Sotir. I am one of the Breakthrough Performance Coaching coaches and very happy to be here tonight. I will start by answering that question with the most important thing that you want to be hitting in your training is consistency across the board. So consistently getting in the water, consistently getting in a run, consistently getting on the bike. And I would say that the long bike ride and run on the weekend, that long brick session, that's one where order matters. You want to do that bike run so you begin to experience what that feels like to come off the bike and run, as well as how fueling yourself really changes that experience. During the week, what I would say is the more concerning piece than doing everything in exactly the right order is one of the reasons things are in the order they're in is to balance out your fatigue so that you're not doing 2 or 3 hard sessions in a row. As those weekends get longer, you're gonna be accumulating more fatigue. And that's when having that balance of a harder day and an easier day following it starts to make your life a little bit easier at that point in time. But do you need to be like, is the magic in sticking to all 7 days for the next 9 weeks? The magic is in showing up most days and being consistent as you kind of work through that week. And if it's easier for you to swim on a Thursday than it is on a Monday, then make whatever change you need to make happen so that you have that piece, that touch in the water or whatever works best for you.
As a follow-up, I was thinking about like doing the longer run on the Saturday and then the long bike ride on the Sunday with the brick, but maybe that's going to be too much because I used to do long runs on Saturdays but it sounds like maybe that could be too much, or I do it one weekend and maybe I just know that's too much, as an experiment or something.
It can be done. You're definitely going to carry more fatigue into that bike ride and run. So it's going to be you're just going to have to be a little bit more aware of how you're feeling and not read too much into like, oh my God, this is the worst thing I've ever done. It's like, no, you're a little bit tired. Maybe you didn't eat enough. Okay, great. Or maybe it just works out just fine, but give it a try. If you find you're really fatigued, chill out a little bit during the week and then flip that the next weekend if you can.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that just a little piece of, if you've got people to run with on Saturday because you belong to a run group that runs on Saturdays and you got people to ride with on Sunday, like if it works into your life better that you run on Saturday and do the brick workout on Sunday, and that's what's going to get it done and not have you dreading a run by yourself or a 3-hour ride out on your own, then I'd say swap it as well.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Ken?
Okay. I got my video working now. So I've done a lot of sprints in Olympics and I've never done a half. So what are the main things to keep in mind in how the half is different? And I mean, obviously you have to train longer, but I was like doing 50-mile bike rides for the Olympics. So doesn't seem that much different. but I know the nutrition is going to be different as well. So what are sort of some tips for people that are doing their first half?
I think this is the perfect segue into like the broader topic, the broader focus of tonight. So let's first find out who you're petting there.
Oh, it's my dog, Ollie.
Hey, Ollie.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right.
Yeah, he's a
And
good
then yeah, for me, I think that is, obviously intensity matters. The duration is definitely longer, especially in the bike and the run components. But now you're going from essentially you're doubling, if not more than adding twice the duration. And this is really when fueling becomes important, is making the switch from that Olympic to the half. Not that fueling isn't important even in a sprint, but it is really critical as we move from the Olympic to the half. So
right. I mean, I just like for the Olympics, like I've always just gotten behind water and views, and I feel like that's not going to cut it for the half, for example.
yeah. So I guess why don't we sort of pause that, and we'll get into a bit about nutrition, a bit about into fueling, where you should be now with your fueling, what you should be focusing on there. And then we'll take even a broader approach, a little bit about the history of race fueling and nutrition, and where the current thinking is now, et cetera. Ooh, bird just flew into my window. I don't know if you heard that, but it should be okay. So I guess I'll start with a little bit about the history of fueling. So we've gone, even recently, we've gone back and forth between you should be taking a ton of carbohydrates to you need to be taking a high fat diet and restricting carbohydrates to make yourself a better fat burner. And now the pendulum has swung back to being more of a focus or an importance on carbohydrates. But over the last 100 years, like 100 years ago, the thinking was nothing by mouth, nil by mouth. Like you were not supposed to drink anything, you were not supposed to eat anything, and that was the forefront of thinking. In the 1960s, there was this famous cyclist, Tom Stevens, who won stages in the Tour de France. He was a world champion cyclist. I'll read you a quote from his coach, which says, 4 small bottles for a long stage of the Tour de France. It's frowned upon to drink more. Avoid drinking when racing, especially in hot weather. Drink as little as possible and with liquid not too cold. It is only a question of willpower. Like this is his coach. So, I mean, that wasn't that long ago. And if you think of like the history of man, this is just yesterday. Well, it's the 1960s. And this is just before Gatorade comes along, and we get the current, well, a lot more research into hydration, the importance of hydration, the importance of fueling that we're going to talk about tonight. So Sue, as we think about where we are in our training plan, we're starting to come up on the longer Saturday sessions. It won't be long until we're into those race rehearsal type workouts. Like, where should athletes be putting a focus? What should they have a handle on now? And how do we get a handle on that? I guess we'll take them one at a time.
All right. I think the first thing that we need to be doing is making sure that we are fueling, particularly those longer workouts and those longer days. Despite what that cyclist's coach said back in the 60s, you do want to drink, you do want to eat. On the course, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, but on the bike for drinking, there will be water, bottles of water handed up or Gatorade handed up. And then on the run, there will, and then for fuel or food, there will also be UCAN Edge gels. And then those same products will be available on the run. So Mhm.
Sorry, yeah, correct. We have two different. Hi everybody, I'm Jeff. I'm the race director. If you're not aware of that, on the bike we'll have, since it's a two loops section. You'll hit the first bottle exchange right before you make the left into the looped area, and then you'll hit another bottle exchange. I want to say it's around mile 30, mid 30s. And each of those will have water and Gatorade endurance products available. And then on the run, we have 8 aid stations that'll have a variety of Gatorade water. We'll have Coke that'll be flat. Later on in the aid stations, salt tabs, UCAN Edge, usually some sort of pretzels or something, for sodium, especially on a hotter day. But yeah, that's generally our plan.
Perfect. So at this point, if starting to think about if those products work for you, right? You want to start to identify what you're able to tolerate, what you can take down, what you enjoy putting in your mouth, and then really starting to figure out how much you need. I think starting particularly with fluids and starting to do some sweat tests and recognize what you start off like, how much you sweat under different types of weather, because we're finally going to start to not be in the house. And start to get a grip on what it is that you need to take down to feel good, strong, powerful all the way through that workout. Jeff, you want to talk through a sweat test and just what that looks like? And
Yeah, sure. So really a sweat test, what we're trying to do is determine how much water or how much sweat rather you're losing per hour. Probably the easiest way to do this is to keep the math simple and only exercise for either an hour, hour and a half, or 2 hours. I really like something longer than an hour. I feel like it takes a bit of time for your body to get up to temperature. So I like the either hour and a half or 2 hours. I think anything longer than 2 hours, and you might need to void your bladder, and that can complicate the math here as well. So to do a sweat rate test, what you'll do is you'll get on a scale prior to your workout. I'd get on the scale naked, holding whatever I plan to consume during the ride. So if I plan to have 2 bottles, I'll hold a bottle in each hand, full bottles, get on the scale, write down that weight. Make sure you write it down, or maybe you're less forgetful than I am, but I always think I'll remember it and never remember it. So write that down. Do your workout in as close to race conditions as possible if you only plan to do this 1 or 2 times. But this is something that can be done under a myriad of different conditions, under some slightly different intensities. And it's a good thing to know and note those conditions so that you know how much you lose when it's cloudy and 70 versus sunny and 90, or just to get a good sense of your sweat rate under some various conditions. So go out for your workout, come back, get yourself naked again, towel yourself dry, get back on the scale with whatever you have left, even if that's just 2 empty water bottles, and note that weight. And then the difference between those two is then divided by 60 is going to give you your sweat rate per hour. To make this super simple is on our website, under the Breakthrough Performance Coaching website. If you go to resources, there is a sweat rate calculator there where you can just input your name, input your pre-workout weight, your post-workout weight. It will calculate everything for you and email your sweat rate per hour and tell you, as long as you put in the weather conditions, it will spit those back out to you as well. So you'll have that to refer back to later. So it's as simple as weighing yourself before, after, and taking the difference between those two. That takes care of one need, kind of your hydration need. We've got a couple other needs. One will be that caloric need, and the other will be that electrolyte need. So we've got our sweat component. What do we want to focus on next, Sue? Do we want to tackle the caloric component and talk a little bit about caloric demand, and then what to replace out there on the bike and the run? Do you want to take off with that there?
So the general recommendations for calorie needs, it's usually given in grams of carbohydrate. Lower end tends to be something around 60, and I'm talking about for the bike right now, 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour, and up to as much as 100, 110 grams of carbohydrate per hour for people who are really gunning for that front end performance. What I would say is start somewhere in that range where you feel comfortable and try it out and see how it goes. The first couple of times taking down 60, 70 grams of carbohydrate per hour, for most of us, it's going to be a sort of mental check. Like, we've always thought about, riding our bikes and running probably as something where we're trying to keep our weight or something in check, or foolishness like that. When we're starting to train for a half Ironman, we need those calories. We need that fuel in order to be able to produce the power to move forward. And if we don't fuel our work, we basically dig ourselves into a big old hole, and it's no fun of any kind. But trying out some different products, trying out what's going to be on the course. Gatorade Endurance is going to come with calories. It is going to come with carbohydrate. A 24-ounce bottle of Gatorade is going to come with 44 grams of carbohydrate. So if you're starting at that lower end of that 60 grams per hour, you're just going to need to either drink more than 24 ounces of Gatorade, which could be a lot, or supplement it with a gel or some Swedish fish or some gummy candy or something that you enjoy eating that's simple to digest and doesn't come with a lot of fiber or a lot of fat.
Are there other options, like that would be like a stroop waffle or something like that? Like,
Yeah, in my mind, there's no real no food. It really depends on what your tolerance is, how fast you're going to be going. The faster your efforts are, the easier that food has to be to digest. So the more simple that food is. But at a half iron intensity, if you enjoy eating a stroop waffle, that is a great way to get in some carbohydrate. It's a package. It's going to tell you exactly how many carbohydrates are in there. And the nice part about stroop waffles is they actually make you a little bit thirsty. So it's easier to chase with the fluid as well.
Yeah.
If I may say something, everybody should have a message, a link in a message that I've sent you. To get a free sample, you have to pay for the shipping of it, but a free sample for the products that are going to be on site on the race, so you know how your stomach reacts to those. And we also have savings. I think there's links in there if you need it. I can send it to you, so you can save some money on that if you want to use that product on course. You don't want to be surprised on race day by how that affects you.
Yeah. Do you have any recommendations for like beverages that aren't too sweet? Because that's why I've always just drank water. I just can't stand like really sweet drinks.
Jeff, you or me?
Well, I'll go, and then maybe you can add on to it. So there are a number of different beverage companies out there. I think the ones that Gatorade is definitely one of the sweeter type varieties. I think Scratch Lab, Osmo, those tend to be less sweet. Oftentimes that less sweet can come with less carbohydrate. So You may need to get your hydration. I know we haven't talked about electrolytes yet, but we will. You may be getting your hydration and electrolyte needs from that beverage, and then supplementing more with the Stroop waffles or whatever you decide to get your caloric needs from. So really, so long as you're meeting those three needs, that hydration need, that caloric need, and that electrolyte need, doesn't really matter so much how you get them. As so long as you know it works for you and you've vetted it out ahead of time. And I would say it is always, always a good idea to at least try the products that are going to be out there on the course, even if you don't plan to use them, so that you know whether there's something in there that doesn't agree with you, whether it's an allergy or taste wise or stomach wise that you just can't tolerate. I have been out on a course carrying nutrition that I thought was going to get me through the entire race. I had made what's called a bomb bottle. I had just a ton of calories in a single bottle that I would take just sips off of, and the bottle was ejected off my bike and just blew apart when it hit the ground. And so I didn't have the nutrition that I was planning on using. So knowing what's out there on the course, knowing that it agrees with you, and then also knowing a bit about it, knowing how many calories are in it per bottle, so that if something does go wrong, you can kind of make up for it on the fly.
UCAN is sending us a drink mix that's they have one that they offer that's a 0-calorie mix. The reason we're going with Gatorade Endurance, Jeff, I think it's probably obvious for the caloric intake as at these races, but they will be sending that, and encourage athletes to try it. But as Jeff said, you will need to supplement some sort of intake by what you lose from a 0-calorie hydration option on the course. But it will be there. But Gatorade Endurance is what we're using as our primary hydration offering.
Yeah, and I haven't tried the UCAN zero calorie stuff, so I don't know how sweet that is.
I have not either.
Sue, your recommendations for non-sweet drinks?
I would say probably Scratch and Tailwind are the lowest flavor products that are offered. They do come with a different caloric profile and a different sodium profile than Gatorade Endurance, and I'm not off the top of my head as familiar, but Jeff sort of started to break that down into, if you know that you need X amount of fluid and X amount of calories, ideally from carbohydrate or primarily from carbohydrate, and then you also know that you need electrolytes as well, then you start to have this ability to have multiple different ways of meeting those needs if you know what those needs are. And the reason I started with talking about a sweat test is you need to know, it helps you to know how much you sweat in different conditions. I know for me personally, if the weather is under 75 degrees, I'm going to sweat substantially less than if that weather is over 80 degrees. So I know I need to drink a bit more on those warmer days. And if I can get my calories from the fluids, it just makes my job that much easier while I'm out there. We want this to be simple too. We don't want this you don't want this whole list up your arm of, okay, at 10 minutes, I need to eat this, and 15, I need to eat that. You want it to be as simple and as seamless as you can make it. So we probably should talk about those electrolyte needs at this point as well.
Yeah. One other product that I thought of while we're doing that was a product called Infinite Nutrition. They allow you to dial the flavor all the way down, so essentially almost flavorless. You can tweak the ratios of carbohydrates. I think you can tweak fructose and sucrose and caffeine and a little bit of protein if that's what you like in there, to help keep you or make you feel a little bit less hungry along the way. So that is one, and their thinking is that they take an individualized approach to nutrition. They'll do a little consult with you as well. I'm not advocating for any specific product, just throwing some options and ideas out there. Before we move into electrolytes, on that hydration piece, I think we talked a little bit about knowing, or you know what, we'll go through the electrolytes and then we'll back up to calculate or knowing how much of each thing to replace, or calculating a little bit deeper. So electrolytes are, well, they're everywhere in your body, and they allow your muscles to contract. They allow your muscles to relax. They are critical for life and for athletic performance out there. In sweat, the primary electrolyte that we lose is sodium. That's the primary constituent, and that's the one that we tend to look at replacing. It can be the most dangerous. Not that they're all not dangerous if they get out of whack, but that is the one that tends to be most troublesome for athletes. And so long as we focus on sodium, most of these commercially made products have a specific ratio of other electrolytes that kind of go along with that. So they'll have that potassium, that calcium, that chloride, et cetera, to go along with that electrolyte. So generally, what we look at is how much sodium you lose per liter of sweat. Now, they're kind of the old ways to figure this out, or to get a ballpark estimate, would be to go out for a run or a ride in hot weather on a sunny day, come back and look at your clothes. If you're somebody who always has a lot of salt stains on their clothes, well, then you're a what's considered a salty sweater. Now, I think that could be you could have just sweated a whole bunch of dilute sweat, but you were just out there for a while, or perhaps you are a salty sweater. I think that method is probably a bit flawed, or is definitely unscientific. The way to know for sure is to have your sweat measured. There are a number of companies out there that do this. Do you need to do this? Maybe, maybe not. If you've never had a problem, then probably not. Probably just replacing some sodium as we move along, as you get into these longer events, will get you there. If you're somebody who is going to go through this and wants to know your exact sweat rate, wants to know how many calories you're going to replace per hour out there, then, and you want to add this piece of the puzzle in, you can look for companies that do it. We're a coaching service that provides this service as well. And it's as simple as you put on a little patch, what's called a tegaderm. So it's essentially it's got a piece of like a little 1x1 cotton swab underneath a little patch. You sweat, you pull this thing off, you stick it in a test tube, you mail it back to us. We run it through a lab equipment analyzer that spits out how many grams of sodium are in your sweat. That all aside, let's get into some practical uses. Like, now that we know how much sweat we're losing per hour. So say we're losing, say I lose 30 ounces of sweat an hour. I know on the bike that my power output leads to a certain number of kilocalories. Do we want to get into kilocalories? So I guess we can just ballpark it, right? Like, if you're a recreational kind of mid-pack athlete, you might be in the ballpark of somewhere around 500 kilocalories per hour out there on the bike. So 500 kilocalories on the bike, I am losing 32 ounces of sweat per hour. How much of that do I need to replace, Sue? Like what percentage of my body weight or body mass can I afford to lose before I really need to start, or before I get into problems?
Asking me?
I'm asking you. Yeah.
Okay. The general guideline rule is that you don't want to get too much beyond 2% loss of body weight. And that means you don't have to replace every single ounce that you sweat out, or every single sodium milligram, or every single calorie. You've got some room to lose a little bit before performance starts to be impaired. And for some folks, that performance impairment doesn't really show up at 2%. It shows up with a little bit more. But that's the general number that's been guiding folks for a good amount of time. So now Jeff's doing math, and I completely realize that we sound like we are very nerdy about this, but we are very nerdy about this because it's one of the ways to make your day go to the best possible performance that represents your fitness is by making sure that your fueling also supports that. And knowing how much you're sweating and knowing what it's going to take to get that back in. So if Jeff is sweating 30 ounces and he wants to be within 2% of that, hopefully he did the math, but I'm going with about 24 ounces per hour needs to come back into your body as you're doing that. So if you're sweating 30 ounces and replacing 24 ounces, you're going to stay within that 2% number for the most part. I just lost my train of thought. Where am I going next, Jeff?
Yeah.
Sodium?
Well, I think that for me, that one bottle an hour is about right with my sweat rate loss. 32 ounces, 30 ounces is kind of a very tame, middle of the road type sweat loss. We've seen people in the 60 plus ounces an hour, which is near impossible to replace very easily. Those folks, and the gut is trainable. It's trainable just like your muscles are to be able to take in a little bit more in terms of fluids, in terms of calories, which is a big part of the reason why now is the time to figure out how much you're losing per hour, and then figure out, all right, is that something, and say I lose 32 ounces per hour, but I can afford to lose over this, say it's going to take me 5-6 hours. I can afford to lose, 12 ounces an hour. And then if I replace 24, am I going to be within 2% of my body weight at the very end of the race? So that's kind of where we're at here. And then figuring out the calorie needs is generally that middle of the pack is somewhere around 500-ish, somewhere between maybe 400 and 600 calories per hour. The folks who are pushing a lot more power out there are obviously going to be higher than that. And then on the run is generally a good ballpark figure, is about 100 calories per mile out there. So plan on about 1,300-ish calories for that run. So then you can divide that by the time you plan to be out there to figure out calories per hour and replace a portion of those. Generally, it's easier to replace calories on the bike. There's sort of less jouncing of your stomach. Intensity Sort of total body intensity tends to be a little bit lower in most folks. Heart rates tend to be a little bit lower in triathletes on the bike versus the run. So that's a good place to make sure that you're on top of your nutrition so that when it comes to the run, you can take slightly less, but still make sure that you take enough to get you to the finish.
And then sodium needs,
Sodium needs,
not going to measure.
what's that? If you're not
going to measure,
and you've never had a problem, I think starting somewhere around that 600 milligram, generally something between 600 and 1,000 milligrams is a safe place to be per hour out there to take in. Gatorade is right there. So if you do that Gatorade endurance formula, that is 600 milligrams if you take a 24-ounce bottle of that per hour. So that gets you right there to 600. Most gels, including the UCAN Edge gels, have a little bit of sodium in there, and that can help supplement a little bit. I think they're like 50 milligrams of sodium, so you're at 650 if you do a bottle and a gel per hour. If you're someone who needs more sodium because you've had it measured and you know that you need more, and you're probably not going to get it from the Gatorade Endurance or the gels alone, and you'll need to supplement with some sort of products such as Salt Stick or Endurolites or some kind of chewable tablets, something that works for you. Again, all of these products are a little bit different. The formulas and milligrams of sodium are a little bit different. So knowing what works for you, and that's something that you'll generally have to carry. Jeff, do you have salt tablets out there on course?
We're going to do the salt stick tabs. The UCAN gels have 50 milligrams of sodium in them, just for your reference. But yeah, we'll have salts like sorry if I lost you there. Salt tabs, I think the Salt Stick brand, the capsules will be out on the course.
Great. Yeah, and those, if they're just a general regular Salt Stick tab, those are 215 milligrams, if my memory serves me correctly, per capsule. So like one of those per hour plus that Gatorade Endurance will put you at 815, which is, yeah, if you're someone who knows you need it. Otherwise, I'd say vet it out in your race rehearsals, vet it out in your longer rides, see if the Gatorade Endurance is enough for you, or whatever. If you're doing a scratch typically has, I know they have some formulas with a higher sodium content in them, so then you can get your sodium there. There's probably some sodium, and that's through waffle as well, and you'll be right where you need to be. So I think it's really just a matter of individualizing it, testing it, make sure it works for you, but paying attention to it.
What, Jeff, do you know offhand what week you have? I'm assuming you have some sort of overload week in that training program, either 3 or 4 weeks out, a big weekend. In that, I mean, that would be an excellent opportunity to try to simulate as much of the race day conditions, trying to, if we can get nice weather for it, to anticipate what kind of issues you might, or deficiencies you might have as you get onto the long sections of that run.
Yeah, we've definitely got a couple of race rehearsals built in. The one thing I will touch on is for any of the women here who are not on a hormonal birth control, or into that later stage of perimenopause, menopause, figure out where you're going to be in your cycle for the race. And if you need to manipulate one of those race rehearsals to be at the same phase of your cycle, do that. I really do recommend that. Most folks, it's not a big deal at all, but there are some folks who are going to start sweating a little bit later, be sweating more sodium in the later phase of the cycle. So you want to make sure you do at least one of those race rehearsals at the same point in time as where you'll be racing, so that you can get a feel for how are you going to tolerate foods? How are you going to tolerate things like if there's if your electrolyte product has a good amount of magnesium in it, you might be more sensitive to it in the second half of that cycle, in that luteal phase. So just to throw that out there, all the gentlemen, I know you love that conversation, but it's an important piece that hasn't been paid attention to quite as much in the past. And there are no hard and fast guidelines. There are definitely some folks who talk about, all women should be X, Y, Z. And that's not true. It's just like sodium needs are individualized, so are people's experiences throughout how they move through their days. So you want to find out what your time looks like.
Yeah, I think kind of along those same lines we have our training camp down at Camp Cathedral. That's on the 18th of May. That I believe registration for that, there's still some spots left for there if you'd like to join us down there. One thing that it will obviously be a big training day. We'll have an open water small swim, but there'll be an open water swim clinic to get people comfortable swimming with others. There'll be a little transition clinic as well, just how to lay things out, how to move through transition. And then there'll be a bike and ride workout associated with that. And then one thing that will become critical to your fueling is rolling through an aid station. And we'll practice that a number of times down there, but that's something that you can also, or should, practice kind of on your own, whether it's on an off day or whether it's during one of your workouts, if you know you need to refuel and you're coming back through home. So you want to talk a little bit about more of what an aid station looks like, especially on the bike at one of these bigger half iron events?
So that aid station it's basically a high-speed grocery store, for lack of a better way to describe it. But you'll be coming into that aid station. You will throw a bottle. If you're any of your empty bottles, there'll be a trash dump at the beginning of it. You can throw everything there. And then you're going to be picking up a bottle in motion. So you need to be able to control your speed. You need to be able to be aware of others. You need to be able to take one hand off the bars and sort of gently pull into yourself that bottle, and then get it placed either by dumping it into your between the arms water bottle or putting it into one of your cages. So there's a good amount of handling that has to happen through one of these. Volunteers will have those bottles out in their hands and generally have a little bit of give to you, but it's something that you need to practice, particularly that one-handed piece and the speed control. Because if you come in super hot, you're going to have a really hard time taking anything in a useful way. And then if you are not comfortable taking one hand off the bars, that's going to make things a little bit more difficult. But if that's the case, then you ride to the end of the aid station where it's safe, you pull over, and then you get what you need, and then you get back on your bike, looking behind you, making sure that it's clear, and getting out and going. But it's definitely something. My precious little bundle used to stand out at the end of our driveway, and I would come by and try and grab the bottles. And most of the time it was a failure. But once we got the hang of things, it's actually not that difficult. It's very much like catching a ball when you don't have a glove. You kind of just pull it into you and use your body to collect some of it, or to gather some of it. And then once you are stable with that, then you put it where you need it to be.
For a visual reference on that, yesterday, I think it was either yesterday or this morning, I posted on Instagram that from pictures from a bottle exchange, where you'll be able to see 3 different images of, they're all athletes. So both bottle exchanges will have athletes from either Bay State or Zoom Multisport. So they've all, in theory, been through Sorry, we're on a ferry and my daughter just climbed over my back and made me kind of chuckle. They'll be jogging backwards or kind of moving in motion with you to kind of counteract that abrupt force of, so to minimize it, smacking your hand as you go through. But definitely look at those if you've never gone through a bottle exchange like that. And I can send more pictures if you want them. Just reach out to me. But that'll give you a good idea of what to expect. They'll typically have a water in one hand and a Gatorade in the other, and you call it out as you approach. You'll see plenty of signage as you approach those, and it's kind of like declaring that you want a water bottle, like you would at a run aid station, where you slide to the right and signal and call out either water or Gatorade. And they're, like I said, they're all athletes, so they'll be tuned in and ready for you. They're not, with all due respect to Boy Scout volunteers type things, they're all people that have done these races and know what you're looking for as an athlete.
Cool.
And if you do miss the grab, like don't flip out. Don't, like, if you miss it, just know that at the end of the aid station, there's going to be a safe place to pull over, or there'll be another opportunity. Don't feel like you really created a problem for yourself. There's always a solution, and you just got to stay calm and think about, all right, well, where's the next person, or where's the end of the station so that I can just pull over and get what it is that I need.
Excellent. I just threw a couple of links in the chat there, a link to our sweat rate calculator. That one's totally free. Use it at will, use it under a number of different conditions. I also threw in a little blurb about our sweat sodium comp testing. That's listed on our website for $75. For anybody on here, just shoot me an email if you want to do it. We'll do it for $25, which loses money for us, but I feel like it's important and would love for you people to kind of know that piece of the puzzle as well. So that's in the chat. Just shoot me an email. I'll throw my email in the chat too. I'll throw Sue's email in the chat.
And then I also added in some general guidelines, like we've been talking about. What are your fluid needs? What are your calorie needs? What are your sodium needs? These are ballparks. So just make sure that you give yourself a chance to start somewhere in the range. And, if you're angry and cranky and grumpy, you need more calories. If you are thirsty and dry and that sort of like desiccated feeling in your hands, you need more fluids. Sodium, generally it's you just need it to keep the fluids moving as well. It's harder to say a really simple guideline like, oh yeah, well then you need more sodium. But you always want that sodium with the fluid so that you're absorbing it as well as you possibly can be.
Does anyone have any course or event specific questions for me while we're here?
How windy is the course? I know it's flat. Does it tend to be windy, or?
There's actually one section before you get onto Vaughn Hill where the second bottle aid station is. It seems there's always a headwind, and it's the slowest section of the course, and we're going to hit it twice. The reason it's so windy is because there's a field to your left and there's no trees, so there's no wind blockers. And I feel like that direction is headed west. So that would be a southwest wind, which is typical for our area. That is always going to feel like it's in your face on that course. Every time I've ridden it, the 10 times I've done that course, it's always, I'm blanking on the road, but I feel like it's right before you turn on the Vaughn Hill where they're St. Leah, where the second aid station is. It's definitely listed on the website where that is, but that's the only real windy part of the course, other than some sections on the swim, depending on the morning.
Well, I'm actually coming to the training camp. Are we going to have the chance to ride the full course?
We will. Yep. We will break out into groups and we won't ride 56, but we'll ride, you'll get to see the entire course as it will be on race day.
Great. And the running course is that shady at all, or is it tend to be exposed?
Later in the course, I feel like it gets more exposed, which is not the time you really want it to be exposed. But once you clear, I want to say it's around mile 8 or 9, you're gonna get into more of the sun. It's just later part of the day. The sun will be directly overhead too. But yeah, it's going. If it's hot and sunny, it's going to get kind of exposed later in that race. Last year it was extremely rainy and heavy rain, so it wasn't an issue. But it's definitely as the sun gets overhead, you're gonna be in the sun for sure. Any other questions about the events or nutrition or the race itself? Is anybody here from a different race, not Patriot? All right. Well, if you have any questions, feel free to email myself or Jeff or Sue at any time. We're happy to help. We're here to support you guys. We want you to have the best race day experience you possibly can. So we're all easy to get in touch with. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you guys so much. You're so knowledgeable. I appreciate all your information tonight.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.